Hello friends and welcome to Noble Literature classes. This is the fifth part of the series on UGC NET English Literature, and here we are going to discuss the Victorian age literature of Britain. So in the previous lecture we talked how the beginning of Romanticism was also impacted by the age of industrialization. Now in the age of Victorian, we see that these steam engines which were earlier used to run these factories, now they run railways and ships and printing presses and farmers combines, etc. We also see the introduction of telegraph and intercontinental cables which allowed for the communication between one place and another place. Instant communications started to happen. Then we also see the inventions of photography and anesthetics. Anesthetics are the drugs which are given to somebody before doing a surgery on them. So anesthesia, anesthetics, they were also discovered during this age. And also Victorian age is also the propounder or the propagator of the universal compulsory education. It was a time of great energy, and the poets and the novelists of this period were extraordinarily productive. It was because they had so many new technologies in hand, and it was also because they were very much excited about all these new inventions. So that gave them a completely new energy to work with. So they had a very high moral tone, if you see in their works, and a very refined taste in literature and also in all the arts as well. Now it was also a time of this rising unrest and the social consciousness. People had started to become or to think about themselves, about the four people in their small families. Those people who were rushing to the cities from villages, when they were rushing there, they started to realize that nobody cares for each other over there. So they started to become more and more self-conscious, and a very a bad depressive state also started to emerge among those classes, those lower classes. Talking about the society in those days, the economic depressions of the 1830s and 40s, they led to the unrest and demands for various reforms in the political system. The working class or the labor class Chartist movement, it demanded equal electoral rights. It demanded equal electoral districts and also the right to vote. So the reform bills marked the beginning of the Victorian age in 1832. Now it helped to correct the situation, and there were several outcries against child labor also and so many other industrial problems. Socialism was also emerging as a political force in those days. Talking about the religious challenges or the religious situation of those days, the established church or the Anglican church of those times was under attacks from so many people, and there was this Oxford movement which came out in order to bring back people to the Christianity or to the faith of Christianity. And we see that Oxford movement also questioned the orthodox or the previous based theological legitimacy of Christianity. Then the higher critics emerged, a group of scholars who studied the Bible textually. They studied it word to word, and then they questioned the authority of these scriptures. Then let's see the scientific changes. Another threat to the orthodox religion was the science of those days. This scientific inquiry it gained popularity by Darwin's theory of evolution, and also the geologist's assertion that Earth is a millennium years older than what Bible suggests it is. Rise of the novel also changed the Victorian society a lot. The Victorians' supreme literary achievement was the novel itself, and this was avidly read because of the printing presses, and there was no distinction made between popular fiction and the literature during those times. Next we have the poetry of Victorian era. Most important early Victorian poets were close followers of the Romantic people, and everybody in those times, all the Victorian poets, they believed that the major important function of poetry was to improve the moral of the society or the readers. Talking about the prose works of those times, the essays and the longer prose works of Victorian writers like Thomas Carlyle, J.S. Mill, Henry Newman, and John Ruskin, etc., all of them had one primary aim, that was to lead their readers to a superior viewpoint. It was to evolve their thinking processes, and it was also to improve their taste in art and literature. Now, talking about the drama of the Victorian society. Now, although the Victorians loved the drama, but their taste of melodrama and sentimentalism kept the dramatists of those days from reaching a new height, or from reaching those greater heights than the ones who were before them. And the only people who are there who have written good drama is Oscar Wilde. He wrote these satiric comedies of manners. So, starting with the major prose writers, Thomas Carlyle, John Henry Newman, and John Stuart Mill, J.S. Mill. Now, Victorian essayists, they were primarily concerned with the criticism of society's morals, their priorities, and their taste. So, Carlyle, his works emphasized the decline of his age. Then J.S. Mill, his works, his autobiographies, autobiographies and essays, they were classically liberal in philosophy. And Henry Newman, he wrote of the religious controversies and the new theories of higher education. Talking about Thomas Carlyle, 1795 to 1881, he coined new words. His unique style and startling shifts in thought, they coined new words and the outrageous metaphors of those days. His famous work is Sartor Resartus, S-A-R-T-A-R, Sartor Resartus, R-E-S-A-R-T-U-S, 1833 to 34. It was written as a biography of a fictitious professor of things in general, and that professor is a diatribe against the social conditions. Diatribe means somebody who is against. So that professor is against those social conditions of society, and it also relates Thomas Carlyle's own spiritual journey from negativism to a kind of optimism based on the intellectual honesty that somebody can develop in life. Next work of Carlyle is On Heroes and Hero Worship, 1842-41. It argues that great men make history and historical events do not make great men. Sadly, the new historicist will believe in some completely different theory. The Marxist will change this phenomena. Next work we have is Past and Present, 1843. This work attacks the injustices and materialism and also the corruption of the Victorian society, and it also wants somebody to emerge as a hero to lead England. Next person we have is John Henry Newman. He was also a major prose writer from 1801 to 90. He was a strong Anglican, and later on he became a Roman Catholic. So he was strongly opposed to any kind of liberalism in the field of religion. Nowadays also people oppose any kind of liberalism or secularism in fields of religion, because if we bring secularism inside a religion, then those moral values or those things are lost. So his famous work is The Idea of a University, 1852. It advocated intellectual excellence. It proposed the theory that education is meant to train the mind rather than imparting facts to people. Another work of Newman is Apologia Pro Vita Sua, Apologia Pro Vita Sua. It was in 1864. It simply means explanation of his life. It is also an autobiographical work which details his spiritual journey and which tells about how he wrestled with the themes of religion and theology and how it all affected his own soul. Next writer we have is John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 73. He studied the Greek mythology since the age of 3. He was influenced by the utilitarian father to be agnostic in religion. His father was a utilitarian, and therefore he became a tolerant liberal person. His works include On Liberty, Onliberty, 1859. It attacks the loss of freedom of thought, and it argues that all opinions should be heard because the minority opinions can also be true. Now, this On Liberty is a major text which the later critics of the postmodernist era who talk about post-colonialism, they will talk about this text. So he says that we should also hear the minority people and we should try to argue with them and try to prove our religion is true, because unless we debate it out and prove the existence of it in the real scientific way, then it might not be true. Next work of him is Utilitarianism, 1863. It has the main tenet which says that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, and they are wrong if they tend to promote the reverse of happiness or the opposite of happiness. Utilitarian, actually, it is a simple philosophy that we should do what is best for most people around us. And it is J.S. Mill's addition to this idea when he says that greatest good for the greatest number of people. This is the concept of utilitarianism. Next, we have three major critics of Victorian era: Matthew Arnold, John Ruskin, and Walter Pater. I have already made a video on Matthew Arnold and his objective criticism, so you can go and check that out in the Literary Theory and Criticism playlist. Now, these people, first let us start with Matthew Arnold, 1822 to 88. Matthew Arnold, he judges literature on the basis of three principles. Number one, design in the total work of that work. And number two, the evidence of the elevated grand style, if it is present or not in that work. And number three, a criticism of life. His major works include Essays in Criticism, which, the first series was given in 1865. It includes the famous essay, The Function of Criticism at the Present Time. So I have already made a video on this work, and it only talks about that literature criticizes about life, and then literary criticism, it analyzes that literature. So criticism is as important as literature itself. Next work we have is Culture and Anarchy, 1868. It includes the famous essay Barbarians, Philistines, and Populace. This work finds no culture among shallow aristocrats of the survival-seeking poor. He says that the Philistines, or the middle-class people, they are the only hope for the enlightenment or the success of the society. Next work we have is Essay in Criticism. Second series, it was published in 1888. So these essays were published in two series. The first was in 1865 and second was in 1888. The second series is a selection of his best criticism, which includes well-known essays on John Milton, John Keats, Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, and also William Wordsworth. Next writer after Matthew Arnold we have is John Ruskin, 1819 to 1900. He was the leading art critic of that Victorian century or the 19th century, and he strongly identified morality with art, and his later writings focused on the social reform of society. So one of his works we have is Modern Painters. It was in 5 volumes between 1843 to 1860. It promotes the English landscape painters like J.M.W. Turner, and it also asserts his criteria that great art expresses human dignity and heavenward duty. Human dignity and heavenward duty. That there is a duty of us towards God. Gods have given us some freedom but also given us some duties. So that was discussed in the Modern Painters. Next work we have is The Stones of Venice. First edition came in 1851, second edition came in 1853. It promotes the thesis that art is a direct function of national morality. Next work we have is Unto This Last, UNTO, This Last, 1860. It marks Ruskin's beginning as a social reformer. He writes that national wealth is a public responsibility which is supposed to be used for the betterment or the social society. Next writer we have is Walter Pater, 1839 to 94. He attacked the Victorianism and its self-conscious quest for knowledge. He said that why are you running after this science and knowledge so much? He advocated the concept of Epicureanism. Epicureanism is a system of philosophy which was founded in around 307 BC, and it is based upon the teachings of the Greek philosopher Epicurus. Epicureanism was actually a challenge to Plato, because as we know, Plato wanted only the teachings to be given in society, and Epicurus wanted people to be happy at the end of everything. So Epicureanism actually, it focuses on pleasure seeking mentality of people. And the famous works of Walter Pater, they include Studies in the History of Renaissance, 1873. In this work he praises Michelangelo because he worked primarily for the joy of creating beauty. Walter Pater also stated that art is not the handmaiden of social problems or faith or morals. Next work of Walter Pater we have is Appreciations with an essay on style, 1889. It contains incisive essays on Wordsworth, Coleridge and Lamb. Now let us come to the novelist of this time. No early Victorian author except W.M. Thackeray took the novel seriously as an art form. But by the 1900s or the beginning of the 20th century, the novel was clearly this era's most distinctive achievement. Now by early Victorianism, I mean by the 1830s or the 1840s. Now the reasons for the success of novel, let us look at them. Novel originated as a middle class genre. Middle class was the prominent class in those days. These were the workers who came from the rural places, who came to the cities, rushed towards them and started living there. So it was beloved by this emerging middle class, and the novel form was flexible and adaptable to the changes in Victorian life. When the Industrial Revolution compounded life's complexities, then the escapist literature became popular. So no matter what kind of society we are living in, but novel was always able to satisfy those people because they just have to switch to a new genre. And although this novel of this time, it gave people an escapist tendency which made its reader to face away from their problems and look at these novels because they were so interesting and so fascinating to read. Now although these novels gave this escapist tendency, but in these novels people found these moral teachings. Some of the characteristics of the Victorian novel include that good characters are rewarded and bad characters are punished. We also see the adjustment of the individual in the society. It is a major human problem because the people who have just came from the countryside or the rural places to work in these industries, they are unable to adjust to the society. They have these problems, and therefore they have this problem of a general acceptance to the virtues of a middle class. So therefore the aristocratic people, they are unable to adjust to the values of these middle class people. Now the major characters of the Victorian novels, they were recognizable as the Victorian types with typical aspiration. All these characters had some deeper aspirations in them. The poor were usually treated patronizingly, like they were rewarded, and the rich were scorned, they were hated and they were envied by the readers. So basically we can say that the heroes and heroines of this period, they had this very good virtues. Now we have historical novels in that time. These were influenced by the Walter Scott's novel of the previous generation. We see that Edward Bulwer Lytton, he was a major novelist, not a major but a historical novelist of Victorian times. He wrote this famous work, The Last Days of Pompey, Pompei, 1834. Another writer is Charles Reade, Reade. Charles Reade, his famous work is The Cloister and the Hearth, Cloister and the Hearth, Hearth, 1861. Some of more major novelists will come later, like Charles Dickens. He also talks about these historical events in his famous work A Tale of Two Cities, 1859. We also have W.M. Thackeray. He also talks about historicism in the History of Henry Esmond, which was published in 1852. Now we also have some Gothic fiction in the Victorian age, and Mrs. Radcliffe published the famous Tales of Terror. And another writer is Emily Bronte, who wrote the famous work Wuthering Heights. The famous character of Heathcliff is very popular, and it was very popular in those days. Then we see some social romances coming up. Elizabeth Gaskell came up with Cranford, Cranford, 1853. It shows a picture of the village life. Another writer is Anthony Trollope, Trollope. Anthony Trollope's Barchester novels, they depicted the interweavings of clerical and the domestic life. These are the chief examples of these genres. Now let us see some major novelists. We have the novels of the three Bronte sisters. They talk about the major theme which was never discussed in the English fiction earlier or before them. It is that a woman's passion and emotional depth can be equal or even more than a man. They talked about the equality or the feministic approach to literature. These three sisters were Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte. Charlotte Bronte is Charlotte. Emily is Emily, and Anne Bronte, Anne. Bronte is Bronte. Now, they did not publish these works under their own names. They used famous pen names to write these works. So, Charlotte became Currer, Currer. So, the surname they used was Bell, Bell. So, Charlotte became Currer Bell, Emily became Alice Bell, and Anne became Acton Bell. So, the oldest among them was Charlotte Bronte, 1818 to 1855. And as she was the eldest, so she was the first one among them to write a novel. Her first work was The Professor, but this work was not published in her lifetime. Next, her famous work was Jane Eyre, 1847. It tells the story of a plain appearing governess who loves a mysterious and Byronic hero, and that character is Mr. Rochester. This was an immediate success because of its emotional and narrative power. Next work of Charlotte Bronte is Shirley, Shirley, 1849. It is a social novel dealing with the industrial conflicts during the Luddite riots, Luddite, Luddite riots. And this work also talked about the better occupations for women. Next sister we have is Emily Jane Bronte, 1818 to 1848. She was shy and reserved, and she is now considered as the genius among these three. And she was also one of the most original poets of the century. Her famous work, Wuthering Heights, 1847, is now considered one of the greatest English novels. Earlier, this work was met with puzzlement with the society because people could not believe that a character like Catherine Earnshaw could really exist. Catherine Earnshaw, Earnshaw. She was a very wild feminine figure in that time. And there was this again a Byronic hero, Heathcliff, who was a very wild and a savage kind of guy who was adopted by Catherine's father, Mr. Earnshaw, and then later on he had to move away from that house because you see that Catherine and Heathcliff, they started to become great friends, they started to become very close, and as they start to develop a love affair, the brother of Catherine, he despises Heathcliff, he keeps beating him all the time, and so as they start to develop a love affair, soon one day they end up in a neighbor's house. His name is Edgar Linton. So when Catherine meets Edgar Linton, she falls in love with him because of his aristocratic manners and high class. So she starts to despise Heathcliff, and then one day she gets married to Edgar. Heathcliff is very much in anger, he wants to take revenge, and so he moves away from that place. He goes away from those highlands, and then he comes back later, a few years later, as a rich man, as a handsome and a rich man and a strong man. He beats Edgar. He marries his sister as a gesture of revenge. He also beats the brother of Catherine. He makes him lose all his estates to him by giving him these bribes by making him addict of liquor. So Heathcliff is shown as a really a Byronic character. So it was a strange novel, and at the same time it was a very great novel as well. Emily Jane here used the natural symbolism, and it makes this a precursor to Thomas Hardy. She uses this technique of strong characterization and this flashbacks. So there are so many flashbacks in the theme in the novel. Next sister we have is Anne Bronte, 1820 to 1849. She was the youngest and she became a governess, and then she used her experiences to write two social romances. Now, the famous one is Agnes Grey, Agnes Grey, 1847. It contrasts the gentleman of the rector's daughter turned governess with the ungovernable children of the upper classics. So it is kind of a semi-autobiography of Anne Bronte herself. Next work is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, W-I-L-D, Wildfell Hall, W-I-L-D-F-E-L-L, then H-A-L-L, 1848. It is considered a kind of very sad novel, a morbid novel, because of this famous character of Arthur. Arthur is an alcoholic who is given to wild debauchery. It is also based on their brother, the brother of these three sisters, Branwell. Now let us come to the major novelist of this time, Charles Dickens and William Makepeace Thackeray. These Victorian readers in these times, they loved to weep at the sentiments and also to laugh at the comedies and also to cheer the cries of popular reforms in the Dickens novels. Thackeray, the more consciously artistic one, he wrote popular novels which contrasted human pretensions and also the human weaknesses. So Dickens' early novels include Pickwick Papers, 1836 to 37. It's a parody of the picaresque novel, and it gives a panoramic view of the 18th century rural England. Another early novel is Oliver Twist, 1837 to 39. It is a dark melodrama of the crime and squalor of the London life. It features Fagin and his school of young cut-purses and thieves. Fagin is a kind of thief whom Oliver Twist meets in this novel when he escapes from working from his second father, the person whom his mother married after his father's death. So he used to work in his mill, but he escapes from there because of the harsh treatment by him, and then he meets this thief or cut pocket Fagin. Now, another work is David Copperfield, 1849 to 50. It is kind of an autobiography of Dickens himself, a semi-autobiographical work. It is Dickens' favorite, and it recreates his childhood very ingeniously. Some of the later novels of Dickens, they are darker and they indicate Victorian society and humanity in general. Now we have Bleak House, 1852 to 53. We see that Dickens' best plotted novel is The Bleak House. It shows the effects of a cruel court and on the English society. Bleak House was actually written on this while he was living in that same house. So he had taken a house, he had rented this house, and he named it Bleak House, and he also wrote a novel on the same name. Hard Times, 1854. It was written with a relatively small number of characters, and it attacks the industrialization and its ill effects. Another work, later novel, great one, it is The Great Expectations, 1860-61. It satirizes the Dickens' own desperate lower middle class passion to become rich or to become famous. Next we have Our Mutual Friend, 1864 to 65. It also satirizes the Victorian materialism and also the uh, flaunting of the wealth. Next writer we have William Makepeace Thackeray, 1811 to 1863. He was 1 year older to Charles Dickens. So Thackeray depicted a whole class of English society, and the newly elevated middle class, or the gentry, or the upper middle class, uh, both were depicted, and they were shown in a very minute detail and in a very graceful style. So major works include Vanity Fair, 1847. It introduces the character of Becky Sharp. Becky Sharp is a girl who violates the traditional morals as she acquires wealth and the social position. Next work of Thackeray is Pendennis, Pendennis, 1848 to 50. It portrays the title characters which are saved by the pure love of a good woman. Next work we have The History of Henry Esmond, 1852. It has been called as the finest historical novel in English, and it deals with the love of the chivalrous young hero for a heartless social beauty or a lady. The next work of Thackeray is The Newcomes, Newcomes, 1853 to 55. It also chronicles the three generations of a middle class family, which is eager to rise in society, in status as well as in the wealth. Next writer we have is George Eliot and Anthony Trollope. Now, looking at the name, you might think he's a man, but actually it is a female who used this pen name throughout her life. Mary Ann Evans was born in 1819 and died in 1880. So George Eliot and Anthony Trollope, they are studies in contrast because both of them were contrasting novelists. George Eliot is also called as the first modern novelist, and it is because she was a very intellectual person and she discarded all these old concepts about the gods or the faith, religions, and also the immortality of a single religion which was created by humans. Now, some early novels of her include Adam Bede, 1859. It talks about the love without marriage or marriage without love, and she says that in both these conditions the results are catastrophic. George Eliot also wrote The Mill on the Floss, 1860. It is a story of a brother and a sister. It's an autobiographical novel, and the leading characters, they are the Maggie character, the leading character. She represents herself, that is Mary Ann Evans. Another early novel of George Eliot is Silas Marner, 1861. It is a nearly perfect Eliot novel which shows how the title character Marner, he is a bitter miser and he is regenerated by a child's love. The later novels of George Eliot, they were more intellectual novels and they promote some of her favorite themes. The first one is Romola, 1863. It is set in the 15th century Italy, and it asserts that moral excellence results from incessant or meaningless good choices, where we do not want any good to happen to us, we are doing good just for the sake of it. Next work it is Felix Hell, Felixhell, Felix Hall, Hall. Felix Hall, The Radical, 1866. It uses Thomas Carlyle's idea that progress comes from spirituality and not politics. And a very famous work, the most lengthy work, is Middlemarch, 1871 to 72. Here he shows a complete society which describes the society of England, and there she accuses that society for not allowing freedom to intellectuals and the cultural pursuits of people. Next novelist, Anthony Trollope. We see that the major or the principal conflict in all his major novels is the struggle to retain the old ways of life against the forces within and outside the middle classes which are trying to change the society. So he's a disciplined person in his writing, very disciplined man. In fact, he placed his watch in front of him, and he used to write about 250 words an hour constantly for 4 hours each day. So that was his dedication towards his work. So we have the famous Barchester novels of Anthony Trollope. These are also termed as English as roast beef, and these are his most popular works. The famous novels in this series are The Warden, Warden, 1855. In this one, the major character, which is the Reverend Mr. Septimus Harding, he portrays a humble goodness. Next work is The Barchester Towers, 1857. It is a sequel to The Warden, and it presents all the clergyman types in an age of Anglican church strife. Like in the age when Anglican church was being challenged, in that age it shows all that clergyman types which exist. So it showed that good clergymen also exist. Last work is The Last Chronicle of Barset, Barset, 1867. And The Last Chronicle of Barset, it presents Anthony Trollope's most complex and deeply religious cleric, which is Josiah Crowley, Josiah Crawley. This person is a falsely accused person of stealing a check for 20 pounds. He is a very generous person. Now we see some novelists who were opposed to Victorianism. Now, in the later parts of the Victorian age, 3 authors wrote innovative novels which opposed the sentimentality and the moral pretentiousness of the Victorians. And these novels were full of the satires, and they were very less appreciated in those times by their contemporaries or the 20th century readers. The first writer we have is Samuel Butler, 1835 to 1902. And he ripped away the mask of respectability, the respect mask, and he revealed a vision of cruel tyranny and rigid morality in Victorian families. The famous work is Erewhon, Erewhon. Actually, it is opposite of nowhere. If you reverse the characters of nowhere, you get Erewhon. So Erewhon, 1872. It is a very dystopian work, and it talks about the bad or the cruelty of the Victorian England. Next work is there, The Way of All Flesh, 1903. It is an autobiographical work, and it was posthumously published, like it was published after his death. And here we see the mouthpiece or the alter ego of Samuel Butler, which is Ernest Pontifex. This character, he challenges all the gods in those times who were revered or who were worshipped by the contemporary novelists such as Thackeray, etc. Next writer we have is Lewis Carroll. Complete name is Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, 1832 to 48. An Oxford lecturer on mathematics, he vented his anti-Victorianist anger in ingenious and symbolically complex children's books. And we see great books of Lewis Carroll now even more appealing to adults in our days. The famous work is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, 1865. It talks about a child's falling down in a rabbit hole and into a fantasy world. There her dream visions and everything comes true. All these dream visions are actually symbolic logics which convey the satire of Lewis Carroll. Another work is Through the Looking Glass. It is a sequel, and it was in 1871. Another dream vision which is even more satirical than the first one. Next writer which is opposed to Victorianism is George Meredith, 1828 to 1909. Here is an advocate, George Meredith. He is an advocate of advanced ideas and scientific methods. So he advocated women's rights and women's suffrage, and he also wrote highly experimental fiction which costed him the appreciation of his fellow writers or the contemporary Victorian writers. The famous works include The Ordeal of Richard Feverel, Ordeal of Richard Feverel, Feverel, 1859. It displays Meredith's ironic sophistication and sarcasm in a novel which is about the love affair of a young man, and this young man is trained from childhood to avoid women. So, this story, The Ordeal of Richard Feverel, talks about how this man finally falls with the woman, and then he realizes how all his upbringing, how the rules which are taught to him by his parents, by the society, how everything is so false, and women are not exactly that bad as he was conveyed. Another work is Beauchamp's Career, Beauchamp, Beauchamp's Career, 1875. Now, it is George Meredith's favorite work. It is a political novel which takes a hard look at the economic problems and the political problems in that age. Another work of George Meredith is The Egoist, Egoist, 1879. This is considered as his masterpiece, and it satirizes the egoism of the Victorian gentleman through his anti-Victorian hero, which is Vernon Whitford. You can remember this figure, Vernon Whitford. He was an anti-Victorian character. Next, we have the novels of Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy, 1840 to 1928. He wrote a long and a very complex body of major novels. Like, his works were very different from each other. They reflected his view of mankind struggling against an indifferent force which rules the world. So, we see that there is an affectionate characterization of Dorset villagers, which is accompanied by humor and folklore. And he often reveals his love of the natural world in very close and minute details, along with strong symbols. However, his view of the life is very cynical and untrustworthy. He does not trust anybody. He does not trust in any of those beliefs of those times, and the novels also reflect on his views. So, one of the great works is Far from the Madding Crowd, first earlier works, 1874. It is a poetic pastoral epic which recounts the love affair between ruggedly honest farmer, the farmer is Gabriel Oak, and the volatile female character Bathsheba, Bathsheba. Next work we have is The Return of the Native, 1878. This novel has the tragic intensity of a Greek drama with characters on the brooding Egdon Heath, Egdonheath, that is the setting. And these characters are buffeted or repeatedly stricken by the blind chance. Next work we have The Mayor of Casterbridge, Casterbridge, 1884 to 1885. It is an out of work, in this work, the out of work hero, which is Michael Henchard, he sells his wife to a sailor. Then all the subsequent action takes place, and it describes Henchard's rise as a mayor, and then he falls to his ruin and ultimately to his death. So it shows how what the ambitions will lead you to. Those ambitions were shown about the Victorian society of that time. Next work, a major work, is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. This is a major novel which has been constantly asked in last 3 years of UGC NET. It was published in 1891, and this melodramatic novel defied the Victorian standards by making a seduced girl as a heroine. The seduced girl, Tess, it was her discovery of aristocratic family connections which led to her downfall. Now, Tess is a lady, and sometimes in her early life, she starts believing that she belongs to a royal family, because somebody tells her that her surname which is there, it used to be an older surname, the Urbervilles, Urbervilles. So those Urbervilles used to be very rich and high class aristocratic people. So Tess believes that she is also among one of them. So one day she meets a lady who is also named as Urbervilles. But the lady's son, he rapes Tess when she is very young, and she is never able to forget that thing. It is a constant trauma for her throughout her life. She marries somebody at a later stage, but ultimately, uh, that ambition to reach a very high place in society, etc., it leads to her downfall. Next work we have is the Jude the Obscure, 1895. This was a very controversial work of Thomas Hardy, and all these critics they criticized this work so much that Thomas Hardy had to change his profession to poetry after this work. And it is literature's most savage indictment of a society which crushes a penniless and intellectual person. And the name of that person is Jude. Jude in this work is a humble stone cutter. Now, he is constantly longing for a good education, but then he never gets to see it because the society constantly traumatizes Jude, and that leads to his downfall. Then we have some few minor novels of Hardy, which he called as romances and fantasies. First work is The Trumpet Major. The Trumpet Major, 1882. It was a romance which was set during the Napoleonic Wars. Another work is The Belle Beloved, 1897. In this work, a sculptor named Jocelyn Pierston, he falls in love successively with 3 generations of women on the Isles of Slingers. Now let us talk about Victorian drama. Here we will talk about Oscar Wilde and some other minor dramatists of this age. Now the Theatre Act of 1843, it snatched the control of this theatre from the major theatres of those times, like the Covent Garden and Drury Lane theatres. They were given this sole proprietorship over the drama by the Act of 1737. So the Theatre Act of 1848, it allowed the modern theatre to develop, and by 1899, the 61 theatres which were there in London at that time, by the end of 1899, these were presenting mostly the melodramas which were marked by suspenseful plots and stereotypical characterizations along with the sentimentalism. So the major dramatist we have is Oscar Wilde, 1856 to 1900. He was the spokesman for the aesthetic movement. Aesthetic movement was art for art's sake, that the works which we are making, they are only meant for delightment. So these were completely against Plato. Now, with his brilliant wit and conscious posing of characters, Oscar Wilde gave some of the best plays, which were comedies of manners. And these comedies of manners were closer to Restoration comedies than to the Victorian plays. Now, the famous work is Lady Windermere's Fan. Lady Windermere, Windermere, Windermere's Fan, 1892. This work wittily supports the anti-Victorian idea that right and wrong are just relative terms, or they just work in some context. Next work is The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895. It is the most performed drama of the 19th century, and it attacks the Victorian upper classes by the brilliant dialogues of it. Some other minor dramatists we have are Thomas William Robertson, 1829 to 71. He has been called as the first modern British playwright, and he introduced the well-made play concept. His famous work is Castle, Castle. Castle, 1867, explores the problems of marriage, and which are there in the different social classes. There are 18 characters in this. Henry Arthur Jones, 1851 to 1929. He began as a melodramatist and occasionally used sensationalism also as his serious plays. Famous work of Henry Arthur Jones is Saints and Sinners, 1884. It is also called as the first serious modern drama. and it attacked the Victorian morality very hardly. Now, nobody would have allowed this drama to be performed if Matthew Arnold had not defended it. Next dramatist, minor dramatist we have is Sir Arthur Wing Finero, Finero, 1855 to 1934. He was the best craftsman in the 19th century drama, began as a writer of comedies, but then he is now remembered for his well-made serious plays. The Second Mary Tanqueray, it is a famous work. The Second Mrs. Tanqueray, Tanqueray. It is Mrs. Tanqueray, not Mary. It was in 1893 and his best known work. It deals ingeniously with a well-worn question: can a woman with a past become respectable in the society again? So these were the novelists, and now we come to the poetry of Victorian period. The poetry, although it followed the romantic people, but still it rejected the idea of primitivism and revolution. They still, although they praised Middle Ages, and they also praised the ancient Greece in their works. So we will talk about three major Victorian poets, among others also. We'll study others also. We have Tennyson, Matthew Arnold, and Robert Browning. Now, some late Victorian poets, including Charles Swinburne and the other group which is known as the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, they rebelled against the early Victorian poets and their conventions and their traditions, because they thought that freer expression is not available in that poetry. For freer expression, we will have to try something new. So they tried the sensual works. Let's talk about Lord Alfred Tennyson, 1809 to 92. He was the oracle of the Victorian age, the most famous poet, and he is also known as the only English author who was elevated to the rank of Lord only because of his writings. Now, he was the unfailing voice of orthodox morality, and his talents were about the romantic lyrics which he wrote. He was also a kind of a mystic, just like William Blake, and also a somewhat dreamer. Now we see his poems as a moralist. So here he gave the famous work Ulysses, Ulysses, 1833. It glorifies the Victorian drive for fullest achievement, giving it the dignity and the powerful expression. Next moralist poetry is Locksley Hall, Locksley, Hall, 1842. It is a dramatic monologue by a disturbed youth whose true love marries into a higher class with somebody else. And therefore, to Victorians, this Locksley Hall spoke about the aspirations and the confidence of people, like how we lose our aspirations and confidence within a second. Another work is In Memoriam, 1850. It is an elegy on the death of his friend Arthur Henry Hallam, and it was called for the long religious faith of Arthur Henry Hallam through the honest doubts which he had. Next work we have is Idyllis to the King, Idylls, Idyllis to the King, 1859. It is a blank verse narrative poem about the Arthurian legends, and here Arthur represents the ideal soul of man coming into contact with the wearing elements of the flesh. And you can note these down because this line is a description by Alfred himself. So Arthur here is represented as the ideal soul of man who comes into contact with the wearing elements of the flesh. Now we come to his romantic lyrics. Tennyson had remarkable metrical facility. He could create great works with his popular metrical style, and the famous works include poems, chiefly lyrical, 1830. It includes the lyrics which were based on the style of John Keats, And in this work, the poet is there. In the poem is there. The title of the poem is The Poet. In this poem, Tennyson defines the poet in romantic terms as the inspirer of mankind to freedom and true wisdom. Next romantic lyrical of him is Poems 1832. Again, it includes some of the best known poems like The Lady of Shalott. It was a medieval allegory. Then The Palace of Art, which was again, it asked whether the poet should only pursue art or poetry in order to help mankind, or should he do some practical activity as well. Another famous work is The Lotus Eaters. It is a descriptive poem based on an incident which happened in the Odyssey. Not his Odyssey, but the actual Odyssey by Homer. Now we have his morbid works, the sad works of him, in which he acted like a mystic. So Tennyson's romantic idealism often led him to a despairing view of the present society. In this we see the famous work, The Vision of Sin, 1832. It is a nightmarish dream of being enslaved to bad or vice or the bad society. Next work is Maud, a monodrama, M-A-U-D, a monodrama, 1855. It is a strange and darker Locksley Hall kind of poem, but it has a bitter and lovesick youth which becomes insane. Now again we have the poem which I am comparing it to, Locksley Hall itself. So Locksley Hall, 60 years after another work is there. So Locksley Hall is a famous thing you can remember with Alfred Tennyson. So the famous morbid poem Locksley Hall 60 years after, 1886. In this work he gives a bitter look back at the previous blighted love affair which he had, and he finds the world of his old age has been ruined by the materialism and liberalism of the later Victorian society. Next we have another poet of Victorian age, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now in 1846, when Robert Browning eloped with Elizabeth Barrett, she was more famous poet among these two. So Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, they were husband and wife. And in those days, although now we praise Robert Browning more, but in those days Elizabeth Browning was more famous because her father was a famous person. So she lived from 1806 to 61, and now we see that she was educated at home and she had a very tyrannical father. And her poetry was appreciated for her pious idealism and her wishes or her hopes or her zeal for the humanitarian reforms. Her famous poems are The Seraphim and Other Poems, 1838. In this collection, it is written in the Romantic style. It was her first work to gain critical attention. Another collection is Poems, which was published in 1844. It contains two familiar poems of the social sympathy, Cry of the Children and Cry of the Human. And there is also another poem, Lady Geraldine's Courtship. Lady Geraldine's Courtship. Here she alludes to her husband's poetry, Robert Browning's poetry, which led to their romance. So next work we have is Sonnets from the Portuguese, 1850, Portuguese, Portuguese. It is a sonnet cycle about her love for Robert Browning. And here, if I tell you, this love affair was kind of a self-pitying love. She used to pity herself all the time. Next work of Elizabeth Barrett Browning is Aurora Leigh, Aurora Leigh. It was published in 1851, and it is a 11,000 line novel which is written in verse. It is a novel and it is her masterpiece. It contains witty comments on the position of women in the Victorian society. Next we have her husband Robert Browning, 1812 to 1889. His reputation grew slowly because his innovative poetry was very different from all the rest of the Victorian poetry. After unsuccessful dramas and long blank verse dramatic poems, uh, he began writing his famous works, which are the dramatic monologues. If somebody asks you what is Robert Browning famous for, then it is his dramatic monologues. He adopted the technique of indirection in his dramatic monologues, which showed the action in the character rather than the character in action. Here, the famous works are Men and Women. It was in 2 volumes, published in 1855. It is the masterpiece of his middle period, and it varied between history, art, philosophy, religion, and it also included some of his best poems like Fra Lippo Lippi, Andrea del Sarto. Now, Andrea del Sarto is a famous painter. Here, Robert Browning tells that Andrea del Sarto was not famous because he did not put much efforts in his works, although he had more inbuilt talent than his contemporary writers, but he did not put much effort in his works, therefore he did not become famous. So his famous poems, Fra Lippo Lippi, Andrea del Sarto, Andrea Del Sarto. Another work, Love Among the Ruins. Another work, Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came. Child, Childe, Roland, Roland, to the Dark Tower Came. Another work of Robert Browning is Dramatis Personae. Dramatis, Dramatis, Personae, 1864. And this work is marked by Browning's grief over the death of his wife Elizabeth Browning. It contains some of his most often monologues, which are still collected till date. The famous monologue which he wrote in this is Rabbi Ben Ezra, Rabbi Ben Ezra. Then another one is A Death in the Desert, and another one is Caliban upon Setebos, Setebos. Now, another work of Robert Browning is The Ring and the Book. It is a blank verse poem, 1868 to 69. It is written in over 21,000 lines, and it is based on an actual 17th century Italian murder trial. Now, the dramatic monologue vividly portrays all the characters of that time and also the time and the setting. The philosophical and religious concerns about the absolute and the relative truth, they are precisely conveyed in this work. Now we have the poetry of Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold was more known or more famous for his critical works, which we already studied. So Matthew Arnold, 1822 to 88, he wrote poems which portrayed intellectuals. These intellectuals feel deeply the loss of tradition and the faith. And these intellectuals are also under attack from science, because science does not believe in religion or these orthodox mentalities. So these intellectuals, who are very much greatly ethical people, they are challenged. The higher criticism of the Bible and the utilitarianism concepts, they completely scared these intellectuals away. Now, Matthew Arnold's poetry, it shows a loneliness and a desperate search for for a meaning in life. So the famous works are Memorial Verses, 1850. It is written on the death of William Wordsworth, and therefore it sets him as a poet of feeling more than Lord Byron, because Lord Byron criticized all those great poets. He was only concerned about his own mind. But here we see that Matthew Arnold, he is concerned about others, and he gets established as a poet of passion and as a poet of thought. Then the next work is the Marguerite Poems, Marguerite, Marguerite Poems. These are written, the poem is there, famous poem, To Marguerite, 1852. Another poem is Isolation, 1855. Now these poems show the poet's sense of isolation and how he tries to communicate with the beloved of him. Another work is The Buried Life, the Buried, Buried Life, 1852. This work expresses the inability of Matthew Arnold to communicate his deepest thoughts to other people, except his rare moments of intimacy. Another work is The Scholar Gypsy. It is written in 1853. Now, Arnold denounces the intellectual and the confusion of his age, and then he idealizes a young Oxford student who has integrity of the spirit and services. That Oxford student he refers to as the Scholar Gypsy. Another work is Sohrab and Rustam, Sohrab and Rustum, Rustam, 1853. It is again a narrative poem about a Persian hero who unwittingly slays his own son in battle. This was Arnold's most popular poem in those days. Another work is Stanzas from the Grand Chartreux. Stanzas from the Grand Grande Chartreuse, Chartreuse, 1855. It is written after a visit to the famous monastery of those days, and it shows the poet in a dilemma. To Matthew Arnold, the old faiths are dead, and the modern intellectualism is powerless to replace the Christianity or their faith. Now, which is the great monastery? It is Chartreuse Monastery. Now, famous work, another one is Thyrsis, Thyrsis, 1866. This is a pastoral elegy on the death of his friend Arthur Hugh Clough. It argues that although Clough is gone, but his imaginative and creative drive will always keep inspiring him. Then another work is Rugby Chapel, 1867. It is a tribute to the poet's father, who was a headmaster at the Rugby school. Actually, his father was more famous than him. So, those of you whose fathers are very famous and at a very high position in society might find it difficult in life to gain popularity or gain fame like their fathers, because it is a very difficult task to reach at a higher position than your father, who is already very successful. So similarly, the Rugby school headmaster or the father of Arnold, he was given tribute by this famous work, Rugby Chapel, 1867. Now, next we have the famous work Dover Beach, Dover Beach. Again in 1867 it was written, and it is a lyric. It reflects the poet's pessimism at the loss of religious faith. He loses his faith in any kind of religions, and this poem Dover Beach, it ends with a vision of the world as a darkling pane on which ignorant armies clash by night. You can note that down. Now we have the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, the pre-Raphaelite poets. These were the poet-painters of the Victorian England. We have Dante Gabriel Rossetti and also William Morris. There is also Christina Rossetti, the sister of Dante Gabriel Rossetti, who wrote the famous work Goblin Market. You can study that. Now, pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood dedicated to carrying a romantic revolt against the academic paintings, and they also wanted to return to the clarity. Their paintings included the paintings of the French places, and they disliked all these new kinds of architectures which were developing and which were changing the shapes of the classical buildings. And we see that they admired the painters who lived before Raphael. For pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, the Raphael was a major destructor of art. Now they also romanticized the medieval past. The first writer, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, 1828 to 1882. He is known first as a painter, and he had no interest in writing poetry about the political or the scientific controversies in those times. He wrote primarily about women and about his sensuousness and about the Middle Ages, which set him apart as a writer in those days. So the famous works include The Blessed Damozel. It depicts the damsel looking out over the ramparts of heaven, and it contains a great deal of medieval sacramental symbolism. There are 3 lilies in her hand and 7 stars in her hair. Next work is My Sister's Sleep. It is a lyric about the death on Christmas Eve and a sublimating of grief in praise of the newborn Jesus Christ. Another work is Jenny. It is a controversial ballad about a prostitute, and it is the farthest that Rossetti went in the social criticism of that class. He did not like how prostitutes were treated in those days, so he had a love for every human being. Next work is Sister Helen. It is a ballad which is set in medieval Scotland, and here we see that Helen, the heroine, she melts a waxen image of Keith of Ewern, Ewern, Keith, Keith of Ewern, which causes him to waste away and die. Another work is The House of Life, and it consists of 101 intensely personal sonnets about love, life, and death. The House of Life also contains his poems about his dead wife Elizabeth. Next painter poet we have is William Morris. Again, he was a founder, and he lived from 1834 to 96. And this early socialist activist, he was a designer of textiles. He used to design these various curtains and wallpapers and furnitures, and he was also a painter and a poet. Now the famous work is The Defense of Guinevere and Other Poems, 1858. Guinevere spelling Guinevere. It is the best single volume of pre-Raphaelite verse, and it is completely medieval in the subject matter. It includes ballads which are strongly influenced by Sir Walter Scott. Another work is The Earthly Paradise, 1868. William Morris's Earthly Paradise, it is his longest poetic work. It contains around 24 verse tales which are exchanged by the 14th century Viking wanderers. Another work is Sigurd the Volsung, 1876. It shows his interest in Scandinavian literature, and it is a tragic version of the Siegfried story. Siegfried was a German warrior. Now the next poet we have is Algernon Charles Swinburne. He was an antagonist to the Victorian era. He revolted sensationally against the Victorian religious assumptions and the middle class concerns. His hypnotic poetic virtuosity in every conceivable meter and stanza attracted young rebels of his day, particularly in his poems about freedom. So we have three stages of Swinburne. First, the stage of pagan, when he worked like a pagan. Now we have his famous work, Atalanta in Calydon, Caldon, 1865. This poem recasts a tale from Ovid into the form of a Greek tragedy. Next work is Poems and Ballads, published in 1866. It was motivated by the desire of Swinburne to be thought as an eminent and terrible enemy to the decorous life. The famous lyric in this Poems and Ballads work is The Garden of Proserpine. Another works we have is in the next stage of Charles Swinburne. It is The Freedom Fighter Swinburne. It is from 1866 to 1799. Here he wrote the major work Songs Before Sunrise, 1871. It is a volume of propaganda poems about freedom and the hatefulness of despotism. Despotism means excess of power. The best known poem here is Hertha, Hertha. It is about the Teutonic earth goddess Hertha, who symbolizes liberty to Algernon. We have Poems and Ballads, second series. So another second series of Poems and Ballads comes out in 1878. The first one came out in 1866. So the second series follows the Songs Before Sunrise with such similar poems like the poem is A Forsaken Garden, and also Ave At Vale, Aveatque Vale. It means hail and farewell. the last years of Charles Algernon Swinburne, he wrote Heptalogia, 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 Heptalogia. In this, he gives 7 jokes. Heptalogia means 7 jokes, 1880. It continues his assault on the Victorian era and his excellent parodies, most notably the ones about Tennyson and Browning. Next work we have is Tristram of Lyonesse, Lyonesse, 1882. It portrays the Tristram Iseult passionate love affair, the love affair between Tristram and Iseult, Iseult, Iseult. They have a love affair, and it is portrayed as a triumph of natural love over the Victorian idea of love. So we have a famous line from the Garden of Proserpine, if you want to note down. I am tired of tears and laughter, and men that laugh and weep, of what may come hereafter, for men that sow and reap. With that, I end this lecture on Victorian era, and in the next lecture we will talk about the 20th century writers. Thank you and have a nice day.